If your content feels scattered, this will fix that. Today, I am joined by Tessa Jelten, and she is breaking down the exact framework of what she uses to help agents simplify their messaging, show up with confidence, and create content that actually leads to conversation and clients. This episode is packed with practical direction and how to think from content to a system and to what really matters moving forward, and how to stop wasting time on things that don't move the needle. If you want clarity, you want structure, you want content strategies you can actually apply in your business, you'll want to listen to this one all the way through. Let's dive right into it. How do entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and experts like you scale a massive business all while having fun and impacting lives? Welcome to the Play Bigger podcast. I'm your host, Raquel Quinnett, business coach, real estate entrepreneur, investor, wife, and sports mom. This podcast will give you real quick tips, strategies, tools, and inspire you to play bigger in business and in life. Are you ready? Let's grow to the next level. All right, welcome to our Play Bigger podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs who want to play bigger in business and in life. And today I have a very special guest. She is a content coach that helps real estate agents simplify content, show up consistently, and build real authority without the overwhelm. She's super passionate. I've seen her speak on stages. She's been on some of the biggest stages in our industry, and I'm so excited to have this conversation around content. As we know, is not going away in our industry, visibility, and what it takes to actually win in this market as a real estate agent and now a content creator of some sort, right? So I want to welcome to the show, Tessa Jelten.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited because this topic, like we were just chit-chatting about before we started, is always changing, and there is a lot to be shared around content creation, so I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, and it changes so fast. I remember in 2020 when I started coaching agents saying, you've got to get online. And they were like, you're crazy. Why would you tell me I'm too busy selling houses? And so I want to talk about and now it changes all the time. So I want to talk about what actually led you to become a content coach, and more specifically in the real estate space.
Okay, I will try to give the shortest cliff notes because it is sort of a long story, but I actually got started in real estate flipping houses when I was in college. I was flat broke and I wanted to flip houses because it looked cool on HGTV. And so I got into doing that, which is a whole nother story in itself. And I just started documenting things as I was going. And as I was going through this process, this was like 2015. As I went through that process, things were introduced like Facebook Live and Instagram Stories. And I was always just quick to jump into whatever was introduced and kind of putting stuff out there. And I quickly grew a pretty local audience. I think I had grown it to maybe 2,000 followers at the time, which to some people may sound like a lot, to others it may sound like not a lot, but it was very hyper local to Arizona, which was very cool. And so I started making connections with a bunch of people locally. I actually became the official real estate partner of the Phoenix Suns. They reached out to me because they found me on social media. And I pretty organically just had a bunch of agents and brokers reaching out to me saying hey, how are you doing this? And it started with teaching little free classes at NAR and Phoenix Association. I would just go and teach these little classes. I would go into random little brokerages. And from there, a few people were asking more questions on how I could help them. And so I've been doing this for, it feels like forever now. And I've gone through definitely all the changes of how content works. I've been managing other people's accounts for so long. And so one thing I always like to say is that when I'm talking about what's working and what's not working, I'm basing it off of having 400 plus accounts under management. And so it's not something that worked one time for one person because they got lucky. I like to talk about things that I see work pretty universally across real estate specific social media, because there's plenty of ways that you can do it, but if you're trying to use social media for your business, and specifically for a real estate business, the way you're going to approach content will look a little different than how you may approach it if you wanted to just be the next Alex Earl or something. It's going to be a totally different approach. And so I always try to keep the focus on that versus just social media as a whole.
Yeah, you said you have manage over like 400 accounts, so you actually get to see the insights of everything. How do you keep up with all the trends that are happening? It seems like it changes like by the minute today.
Yeah. Well, and to clarify, not 400 actively currently, but
Okay.
we've managed over 400.
Yeah.
I would say a few things. One, I try not to pay too close of attention to like trends per se. I try to base it off of like frameworks that are continually working over and over. If there is something that's like happening and kind of becoming more popular and trendy that I actually see can be like a real viable strategy to incorporate, then we like to incorporate that. But one thing I think is super important is making sure that it still aligns with how you are in real life. I always like to use social media as an extension of who I really am. I think the best thing that can happen is somebody meets you in person and is like, oh, you're exactly how I thought you'd be online. And so always trying to make sure that it still resonates. And sometimes following too many different trends and things like that can take you so far off from who you really are that it's sort of defeating the purpose overall. So I try to stay away from things that are too trendy and just really sticking to things that are actually proven to work. And when you look at it that way, things don't change quite as much because things stick for a little bit longer if we're kind of following that principle.
What do you think is working right now for real estate agents? And what do you think is generating them the most leads if their only goal is to obviously create conversations, generate leads, and sell houses?
Well, I'm sure a lot of agents have heard this by now, but definitely the local content. And when I talk about local content, I do think it sometimes is perceived differently to different people hearing that. Of course, you can create cool stuff highlighting a coffee shop you love or, local events, but you don't have to be like a newscaster to be able to share local stuff. What we see working really well right now, and you've probably seen this on social, is those short reels where it's like driving through a neighborhood and it says something on screen like, if I was relocating my family of 4 to Arizona in 2026, these are the neighborhoods I would look in. And then it's kind of breaking down a couple areas. So a bunch of little variations of things like that, where you're essentially giving somebody insider information of what life is really like here. And so sometimes that can look like highlighting things to do or cool restaurants, but a lot of times it's also, what is your circumstance? Are you a mother? Are you a family? Are you a young professional? And what draws you to your area, I think is a really, really great way to come across authentic and also start a lot of conversations, for better or worse, because sometimes the comments on those are people saying, no, oh my gosh, I would never move my family there. But in my opinion, that's great conversation, because now you can start to, rebuttal that and talk about, oh, well, where would you recommend, or where do you guys like? And it can lead to a lot of really productive conversations, whether they agree or disagree.
You mentioned something about news articles, and now we're starting to see this trend of AI. How do you feel about agents using AI or duplicating themselves as, this other Raquel to generate way more content?
This might be a little controversial, but I've said it before. Agents using that, I think you are absolutely missing the mark. I think that it is such an incredibly huge waste of time for most agents. Get good at creating content first. It doesn't take that much time before you go out and do this AI clone, because it's not doing what you think it's doing. Like, most people can tell you're talking weird. It doesn't look quite right. I think there may be a time and place in the future where there is a good use case for that. But right now, the amount of time and effort that a lot of people are putting into that, or even worse, being sold this like thousands and thousands of dollars to clone themselves and create a content funnel, it is just, I think it's something that I'm sad to see a lot of agents falling for, because I've not seen one person do that where I've been like, wow, that was a good strategy, a really good use of your time and money, honestly.
It's so interesting you say that. I mean, you're in the game, right? And so I always love talking to experts that study this all the time and that are not just beta testing. Of course you're testing, but like you're in it. And so it's interesting because you come off so many calls and they're like, do this. And then it's like, no. And you look at how much business they're actually doing and it's like zero. Right? Yeah. So it's interesting. So what do you think is the biggest mistake real estate agents make with content today?
Oof. The biggest mistake that first comes to mind is honestly overcomplicating and underacting. They are overcomplicating in the sense that they're attending all of these workshops, they're going to all these classes, they're buying people's courses, they're listening to the opinions of 50 different people, but then they're not actually putting in practice any of those things, or they will for a week and then they change it up the next week and then they're silent for 2 weeks. So I honestly think, and I've proven this time and time again, if you were to just consistently post at least 3 times a week, something that has to do with local things in your area, real estate related stuff, things about yourself, highlighting that on social media, you would have much higher success over time than any of these other kind of like quick solutions that a lot of people are seeking. So it's not some magic pill, but it is just consistent content over time makes a really big impact, because some of the main feedback I hear from people all the time is that their sphere, their friends and family and the people they're connected with are reaching out to them and saying, oh, it looks like you're crushing it. You're so busy. Mm-hmm. That's the perception simply from seeing your content all the time. They have no idea how many deals you do or don't do. They are simply seeing your face a lot. And so it's really anchoring in their mind that you're in real estate, and the perception to the public is that you've got a lot of stuff going on. So yeah. I think that is the quickest and easiest fix for what I see most agents like making mistake on.
Okay, so I want to take that a step further. What if there's an agent right now listening to this or watching this on YouTube and they're like, Tessa, I'm so consistent, but I'm just not getting lead. What usually is broken for them?
So yeah, the leads game on social media is sort of a different approach. I think that level 1 is consistently posting. I think that level 2 is refining what you're posting. So one thing that I love to do is, if you've truly consistently posted for at least 90 days, which most people can't honestly say that they have, but if you have done that and you've seen absolutely no progress, then what I like to look at is all of your previous content, looking for those slight outliers. Now that may mean that you had most of your videos get 200 views and you had one that got 350. To me, that is a slight outlier, and I want to look at all of those posts and see what about that probably gave me that advantage, and then optimize to make more of that kind of content. That's one great way to slowly kind of climb your way up to better performing content. The second thing is, I find a lot of people are very passive on social media when it comes to lead generation. It absolutely can happen for you that people reach out to you and find you through social media. But if you are really looking for it to more quickly yield results as far as leads and conversations, you should be spending time reaching out to people through social media. It doesn't mean you have to DM someone and say, hey, are you looking to buy or sell a house? But sending 10 intentional messages a day to the people that follow you or that have already interacted with you and trying to just start a genuine conversation, it will have such a massive impact on your business and start to generate a lot more of those conversations that ultimately lead to a conversion down the road.
I love how you break it down. I'm like all about systems. So I love like the different levels. I love the different frameworks. So my question to you, Tessa, is like, there's so many people out there that are teaching content. Some are like, you got to stay consistent for 90 days, or there's like a minimum, to stay relevant. In your opinion, after watching so many different people in our space, what do you feel is like the most effective? Is there a minimum? Is there such a thing of like posting too much? And it's just overkill?
I mean, I'm sure there is somebody who's posting too much that would be considered overkill, but in my opinion, as of right now, volume is typically resulting to bigger reach overall. So I do think the more you post, the better. But here's what I will say. I always love the phrase, start from where you are with what you have. And so I tell everyone, start with a goal of consistently posting 3 times a week. I do believe that 3 should be the minimum. Anything less than that, I don't think is really worth the time and effort you're putting into it. So at least 3 times per week. Do that consistently until it becomes so habitual that you're like, oh, I don't even think about it. And then start increasing from there. so often I see agents that will go from 0 to then posting daily, and then they fall off because they don't have a system. And then I call them roller coaster posters, because they're just constantly up and down, and it's not really giving them a result. And then they keep saying, oh, social media doesn't work, but it's because they go on these crazy like up and downs of posting. And of course that's not going to work, because the algorithm has no idea how to categorize you or who to show you to, because you keep posting and then ghosting. And so I think that that's something that's super important to pay attention to, is those two key factors if you want to actually like consistently build yourself up.
Don't be a roller coaster poster. I freaking love that.
Yeah.
So is there you said 3 times a week. Should it be like carousel? What do you think is like hitting today? Should it be a reel? Should it be just a static post? Should it be a quote? Or should it be a local like picture, B-roll? I mean, What do you see is like a good like simplified system that somebody could take today?
Yeah, what I always love to say is alternating reel, carousel, reel, carousel. Very few times nowadays is it relevant to post just a single static image. You don't see those really doing as much anymore, unless, again, you are somebody who's already notable and people care to just see like a single photo. But again, bringing it back to the real estate side of things, using as much of that content as you can to really communicate what you're trying to get across. So I always tell people alternating reels and carousels, but then paying attention. I have some clients who their reels perform exceptionally well. Carousels almost always flop for them. I have other people who it's the complete opposite. And then for myself personally, it's hit or miss. I have some carousels that take off and others that don't, and same with reels. And so I do think when you're trying to refine a strategy, it's great to go for, I always like to work in kind of 90-day increments. Do 90 days of alternating reels and carousels, and then pay attention to what's working, and you can adjust from that point going forward. But I find incorporating both is almost always a really good strategy.
What do you think is the type of content that is like long gone, like the ins and the outs, or is like totally overrated today that agents probably shouldn't bother with?
I mean, any graphic, like just sold, listed, price reduction, never has anyone cared about those, but especially in today's day and age, there is nothing that tells me that you don't have a social strategy more than seeing that on your feed, honestly.
Truth bomb right there. And I'm so guilty of that last year, because it was like, okay, we just need to get something out there.
Yeah, to be fair, there is something to be said for just having a presence, period. I just always, and my friend Eric Simon and I, the broke agent, we always talk about this. We call it the so what test, because so many people are viewing content nowadays, and whether they consciously think it or not, they're sort of thinking like, so what? What's in it for me? What do I get out of this? And so asking yourself that when you go to share content, if I'm posting something that's like price reduction, who is that serving? Nobody asked for that information. It's not relevant to them, especially a just sold really doesn't impact you. And so always trying to kind of put stuff through the just sold or through the so what test, I think is really important.
So in real estate, as real estate agents, we are constantly busy. There's always things going on. How do you feel about agents either batching content, like so that they can actually stay consistent, or posting in real time today?
I'm a huge fan of batching content. I always love to have stuff planned out for at least a week. There's many ways to approach batching. So I like to plan out content for about a week at a time. But what I'll also do is periodically, and I don't have an exact framework for this, but like, for example, at the end of each year, I like to go somewhere in December. It can be local, or sometimes I make it a fun little kind of excursion, a little trip with a friend or something, and shoot as much B-roll content as possible. So I've got outfits, I'm shooting all of these clips, and I just have a folder in my phone of like 400 B-roll clips and photos and things that I can pull at any given time, so that I'm never in that situation where I don't have a piece of content to post. It's really a matter of just pulling that and kind of piecing things together. So even if that's all you do, I think that that's a really, really effective way to just set yourself up for success, because you may have all the time in the world right now, but I think we all know in real estate, things come in waves of how busy you are. And if you don't prepare, it's really easy for that to fall way down your priority list, Next thing you know, it's 8 p.m. You didn't post today. You're scrambling to try to find something. You think, oh, shoot, I'll just do it tomorrow. And then that's, again, how you fall into that roller coaster poster kind of habit that I was talking about earlier is not having the preparation. So I'm a big fan of batching content. Though I do post everything manually real time, I like to have it all prepped so that I'm not spending a lot of time like coming up with what to say in the moment.
I love it. So speaking of like systems and tools, what are some of the most common or things that you would recommend as far as systems or tools? Because you said you post manually, and there's some people that probably use tools right now that post automatically.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would recommend today that agents should look into?
I think as far as if you need to schedule things out, which is okay, I definitely, in my experience, and I know Instagram says that they don't suppress it, but in my experience, I do find we get a better reach when something is manually posted. Mm-hmm. Again, I've tested it hundreds of times, and that's what I have seen to be true. So I think if you can manually post, very important to do so. If you need to schedule and that's the only way you're going to be able to stay consistent, I would much rather you schedule your content than not post at all. So honestly, a lot of times what I tell people is go put it in your drafts in Instagram. You can schedule within the Instagram app, I think is a really easy way to set yourself up for success. If there was one platform I would recommend, I love the tool called Metricool. I don't use it to automate posting per se, but I love the insights it gives you, kind of like a deeper dive into what's working and what's not. You can spy on competitors. You can get all kinds of cool stuff in there. But it's certainly not necessary, I don't think. You could definitely just use Instagram to schedule out your content for you.
How important is agents' bios today, or really niching down instead of like serving, let's say, for example, the whole valley, or just luxury, or just flips or investors? How important do you think that is for them attracting their ideal client?
I think bios are extremely important. I always harp on that. I can't tell you how often I look at an agent's profile and I have no idea what market they serve at all. It's like, for some reason, that information is always missing, and I have no idea where they serve. So bios are extremely important. As far as niching down, it still can be very helpful, I think, because one thing I love is when somebody's content speaks to you so clearly that you're like, oh my gosh, are you inside of my head? How did you know that? But in the way that content works today, being that like most of the people seeing your content are not always the people following you, and you have that opportunity, it doesn't matter as much to be quite as niche with who you're speaking to and everything, if that makes sense. So it's sort of a little bit of both. You can still use it to your advantage, but it doesn't matter as much as it used to. I used to harp on, you've got to niche down, you have to speak just to one person, but now we can put content out and it can get a much wider reach. And so it doesn't have to all be within just one specific niche.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's this question that the audience is thinking today. So I try to think of like some questions like, oh, what would our listeners be thinking? And I would probably say some of them are probably thinking like, how do I not sound like every other realtor while being like professional or having my own personality in it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I do think a few things can be true. One, nobody is paying that close of attention that they think that you sound like another agent. I think that most people are making that up in their heads. Most people barely even remember the post that you just posted that they just scrolled past. So I always tell people, like, get out of your own head. You're out of your own way so much more. Nobody's paying that close of attention. So that's number one. But number two is I do think it's important to let your personality come through. And that can look different for different people. Because some people do like to be more edgy and say things that I would never say, but it works for them because they're attracting the people that actually resonate with that. Even if it is something that maybe I find unprofessional, for them, it's attracting the kind of people that don't want a super professional, uptight agent from their perspective, So I do think that there is a time and a place for everyone to let that personality come through. But the best way that I think, like a tactical way you can go ahead and do this is, again, basing content around who you are or who you are trying to be. So on a most basic level, for a lot of people, if you are, let's say, a mother of 3 and a wife, and you love gardening or something like that, like those can be great things that you ingrain in your content that immediately set you apart from the other agents that probably have no interest in talking about school districts from the perspective of a mother, or talking about backyards from the perspective of a gardener, and so adding your layer of perspective based on who you are is a great way to kind of set yourself apart, and then also talk about something that's really relevant to you. If I tried to create content from the perspective of a mother, I'm not a mother, so it would be very inauthentic. I probably wouldn't give good advice. It wouldn't be relevant to me. And so immediately that's a differentiator from somebody who has that element.
What's something that agents don't want to hear about content but need to accept because it gets results today?
I mean, I probably sound like a broken record, but just doing it consistently longer than you think you need to. I think a lot of times they'll attempt it for too short of a period of time before they deem it not working or not worth their time. I always tell people you need at least 90 days of consistent content every single week to start building that momentum. And in some cases, it happens much faster, but in other cases, it can even take longer than 90 days. But if you stick to it and you actually stay consistent, it works 100% of the time.
So we have a lot of people that are top agents that listen to our show, as well as teams to really, really big teams and big brokerages. So if they were thinking of content at scale, what would they need as far as a team? Because I'm sure it's not a one-man show. I've got teams today that have several, have a media department. So what would you recommend from your perspective of just putting consistent content out there for their team, for their agents, or even for a busy top producer that's closing 100+ deals? Obviously their time's limited. How would you scale content as far as a team goes? Because I think a lot of people are well, who do I hire? And how should I vet them? Should I hire a social media manager, or do I hire a videographer?
Yeah. I honestly think a strong social media manager is really the one hire that you need. Most cases, you do not need to have a videographer following you around all the time and filming all this stuff. I think the perfect combination is you have a strong social media manager that can take what's in your head and bring it out and help to communicate your true personality and your business for you on social media. I always tell my clients, my goal is that people don't think, oh wow, you hired a social media manager. My goal is that people think, wow, you're crushing it online, and they think it's really you on there, and you get to just giggle off to the side because you know that it's not you. But we want to be able to bring your personality through, bring your brand through, your business through, and then pairing that with meeting with maybe a local person to shoot some content, photo, video, maybe quarterly or twice a year. And that doesn't always have to be a professional, in a studio. In fact, nowadays, a lot of the content that performs much better is the stuff that, you grabbed a friend from the office and you guys go to a cute coffee shop and snap a couple photos and videos in that moment. Or at your open house, you have another agent come meet you and you guys record a couple quick B-roll clips. Or you just prop your phone up with a tripod and you record it for yourself. I think a lot of times that is more than enough to really start scaling content. And when you have somebody who can take your concepts and what's kind of going on in your head and extract that and put it out on social for you, that's really what you need to kind of scale the content piece. And then again, from there, you can see what's working well and double down on that if you intend to continue growing on social.
So I'm going to take that a step further, because I know that there are several agents that are probably going, okay, I'm going to get a social media Tessa manager from offshore, or a VA that's going to do tasks. And what you just said, and I talked to Sharon about this too, when we were in a mastermind together, is you need somebody that actually can take what's your intellectual property and what's in your head and actually strategize of how you're going to show up. What is the biggest difference? How do they find, not all, here's what I'm going to say, because I've gone through several. Not all social media managers are created the same. Sorry to say, right?
Yeah.
There are people that just can create Canva templates and they call themselves a social media manager. What you just said is a unicorn.
Yeah. I do know that. And I wish there was an easier way for me to tell you where to find all of that. I have been
So
doing
I
it
would be
now
like,
for
what
years.
should a agent that's hiring a social media manager, top agent that's hiring a social
Yeah.
media, what should they look for? Like basic minimum, right?
Yeah, I
And
think
like, how
that
do
I
you
think
test
that they're
that?
really looking for somebody who will actually help bring ideas to life and won't rely on you to tell them what to come up with. Like one of the best pieces of feedback I get from my clients is they love that they don't have to come up with an idea ever. We create absolutely everything based on what we know of them. If they have an idea they want to bring to life or they see something they like, we always encourage them to send it to us and we can help, build on that or recreate something exactly. But 9 times out of 10, we are coming up with all of that because of what we know of them and the detailed onboarding. So I think if you're looking for somebody to be a social media manager, you're looking for somebody who will be collaborative with you in the content creation and the ideation process. And I love virtual assistants. They're very, very helpful. There's a great use for them.
Totally.
If you know exactly what content you want and you've already got your templated content, you're going to tell them exactly what to do, that could be a good solution. But most of the time, the reason people are not on social media is because they don't know exactly what to do. They might have an idea of what they like, but they don't know a strategy. They haven't got to that piece. And so I think that that's what you really need to be looking for is somebody who can bring that to the equation. And in my opinion, I do think it is a added bonus if they are somewhat familiar with real estate as well. Because I know many people who've worked with social media companies that are otherwise great companies, but there is nuance to real estate that if you don't know it, you just don't know it. And sometimes that's terminology, sometimes it's fair housing, sometimes, it's all of these things that are just, you almost don't think to teach someone if they don't know it until it happens and you're like, oh shoot, I need that to not happen.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more because there are a lot of agencies, and there's agencies that I know hit us all up on DMs or social media managers that hit us up all the time saying, I could manage your social, I could edit your videos. So like what Tessa just dropped is like something to really think about, especially during the onboarding. You'll know a lot, and it does help when they know about real estate and even your local market because they can talk about the differences between Paradise Valley and Scottsdale, and there's nuances to that. Right. And so I do think that that is extremely helpful. You have so much knowledge when it comes to content, and you dropped a ton of value for our listeners today. If you were starting from scratch, right, knowing what you know today, like how would you approach content if you were an agent that was trying to get visible, that already has a business, right, and you had to start today?
I think that, and I'm going to try to break it down as simple as possible because there are a lot of little elements that make a difference. But what I would think about is picking the cadence that you'll actually be able to stick to and being really honest with yourself. I know that a lot of us want to just say, oh yeah, absolutely 5 posts a week or 7 posts a week. But truly, if you haven't done that yet, 3 is where you should start. And that's probably still going to feel challenging sometimes. I would base it off of my 3 times a week or however many you're going to post, picking kind of like some pillars or avenues of styles of content for those 3. So for example, if I'm going to say 3 posts a week, maybe one of those is a local highlight or neighborhood feature. Maybe one of those is more of a brand builder and kind of talking about myself or showing my personality a little bit. And then maybe one of those is more specific to real estate or information that's important for somebody to know if they're looking to relocate or buy or sell or something. That's just 3 examples. And then that makes it really easy to kind of even roughly map out what your posts will be. Even if you don't go as far as editing the videos and creating the captions and all that stuff, as far as your planning, if you even just had a note in your phone where you mapped out, here's what I'll post about this day, this day, this day, that will give you much better structure going forward because you don't have to sit there and just come up with something on the spot. From there, I would also make sure that you can definitely use AI to assist you, but don't just rely on ChatGPT to write your post for the day. I see that happen very often also, and it's not doing a lot of what you think it is, and sometimes can be very inaccurate. I've seen people post ChatGPT posts recommending 5 Scottsdale restaurants, and none of those restaurants exist. So a lot of mistakes can be made. So use it to assist you, but don't rely on it to just do all of the work for you. I think that would be where I would begin. And I would do that for a minimum of 90 days. And over the course of that 90 days, if it's feeling easier, I would add in more posts. I would incorporate a lead magnet. I would start to kind of develop on that strategy. And through that, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to start new conversations, and you're going to really quickly realize what works for you. Because some people want to batch for a month at a time. Other people prefer to be more real-time posting, and everyone has a different preference. And so you'll kind of find what works better for you as an individual. Or you'll find that you hate it and you want to outsource it altogether.
What about stories, Tessa?
Yeah.
Is there a cadence too when it comes to like, okay, if I'm going to post 3 times a week, what about my stories? What should I put in my stories? Is there a minimum that I should post throughout the day?
Stories are fascinating. They have changed quite a bit. I do think, and again, this is one of those things that Instagram even comes out and says different than this, but what I see is people who are active on their stories throughout the day, like couple stories throughout the day, every day for the most part, tend to have increased reach with their other content that they share. So I like to tell people to not overthink the stories too much. Just throughout your day, start making it a habit to show a couple things. That could be, you take a quick photo of your phone or of your computer while you're scrolling through MLS, and you post it and say something about creating a custom search for a new client or something. It could be your coffee order. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what the content actually is on your story, as much as we're just being active on there. You can use it to also incorporate some polls and questions and stuff like that. But more often than not, I think just sharing stuff to your story makes a difference.
Okay, you briefly talked about funnels and lead magnets. What do you think are the lead magnets that are actually truly working for real estate agents?
Yeah, it does vary. I try to stay away from a lot of times like the simple buyer's guide, seller's guide. Instead, you can even take a lot of that same information, but packaging it different. So in the same way that we've seen hooks become a very important thing for social media content, think about that basically in anything you put in front of somebody. If I just say buyer's guide, it doesn't really give me any sort of emotional pull. But if I say the ultimate checklist for 20-somethings looking to buy before their 30th birthday or something like that, I've now taken what was maybe the same exact content, but I've packaged it for a specific type of person solving a specific problem, and it makes it feel like that's something that I need that information. Buyer's guide is so generic, it's so general, that information's everywhere online. We want to come up with stuff that's more specific to people. So I think anything that can really hone in on a specific area, person, outcome, that kind of stuff is really engaging for people. And so it could be guide to local restaurants. It could be I think a great one is if you and your spouse always argue over where to go for date night, here's a list of 20 of the best places in Scottsdale to solve that. And now you're talking to something that people probably are oh yeah, we can never decide where to go. And you can play into it. You can make a bunch of great content around it. It's sort of subliminally attracting a specific niche of people as well, without it specifically saying so.
Yeah, you couldn't have said that any better, because I am finding that the buyer's guide, even the nobody wants to read 20 pages.
No,
but the cheat sheets, the checklist, something that's like a one-pager that can give them the information, top coffee shops in Scottsdale, is hitting way more with some of our clients that are scaling, obviously, their leads. As we look into the future, what's your take on where content's going in the next couple of years, and what do you think it's going to be changing for real estate agents the fastest?
Honestly, there's a lot of talk of what's happening in the content space. What I find interesting, and I kind of said this in the beginning, is a lot of times it stays relatively even for the real estate industry. So as much as we see things change in a lot of content overall, I do think that there is some level of consistency in the content world for real estate. So I would say paying attention to, and we also, each year we see people that go completely against what we were told is going to work or not work, and it works well. So I think the biggest thing you can focus on is building a consistent local audience, remembering that if your goal is to sell more real estate and your social media is supposed to aid you in doing so, having even 200 followers, if they're local to your area and they engage with what you share, is a win. I think a lot of times we get distracted by like chasing a viral video or a certain number of followers or whatever those metrics may be that don't actually equate to anything in your business. So I think the biggest thing you could focus on is always paying attention to the metrics that matter for you. And that should be things like new conversations, local followers, local eyeballs on listing videos, like things like that give us much more tangible results. And they may not always look as pretty or feel as cool for your ego, but that's really where you win for using it for business. So I guess in a roundabout way, that's kind of what I predict will still be very important.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that's going to hit with a lot of our audience, is because I do have a client that had less than 2,000 followers. They did over 100 deals, but they just stayed consistent and they engaged with their community like there was no tomorrow. So you don't have to have this big follower account. You don't have to have these big viral videos for you to do a ton of business in our industry. I really appreciate you affirming that for some of the people that are listening.
I think that's so crucial, and I think it's often overlooked when we talk about the content conversation, because one just quick thing to add to that too is there's a time and place for real estate specific content. Real estate specific content is never going to perform, well, I shouldn't say never, but rarely is it going to outperform, like personal things. But it's very crucial that you incorporate that into your strategy still, even knowing they won't perform quite as well. Because otherwise, and I've seen this happen, people will go all in on the local highlights and they're only sharing restaurants and things to do. And quickly, their audience forgets that they were in real estate at all. And so it is very important. And again, this is maybe the conversation of working with the right people, is knowing when to incorporate content, even if it won't be the top performer. We're not always seeking, and that's why I love the term metrics that matter. We're not always just seeking the most views or the most likes. We're also seeking the things that are overall building your brand and keeping you anchored in your audience's mind that you are in real estate and how you can help them.
Love it. You dropped so much knowledge today. I am so appreciative. Where can people connect with you if they want to get more information, see what you're up to, see what stage or where you're speaking next, right? Or what you're teaching next? Where can people connect with you?
Honestly, the best place to connect with me is on Instagram, naturally. That's where I spend a lot of my time. And I always like to say as well, if you have ever messaged me on Instagram and didn't get a response, I love to give people the permission to please send me another message. I usually like to take those messages offline and go to texting or something afterwards, but I get a lot of activity in my inbox, and so I always tell people, please reach out a second time if I didn't get back to you or something, because my brain is always thinking about different things, and maybe I read it and bounced on. So I love connecting on Instagram. It's a great place to find me. My username is Tessa Bella, and I open my inbox to anybody. So please send a message. I would love to connect with you, even if you're just saying, hey, I heard you on the show. I would love to hear from you guys.
Love it. And I can attest to that because I have never really connected with Tessa in person, and we're in the same city, and it all just came through her DM. So there's always one question that I ask every guest that comes on the show is, what does Tessa do to play bigger in business or in life that can help our audience today?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think one thing that I do is I push myself to do things even if they make me feel uncomfortable. By nature, I tend to be introverted. And really? A lot of people, yeah,
sorry.
A lot of people don't know that. No, because I speak on stages all over. I go on all kinds of things. Every time I'm having a mental panic attack, I'm usually completely gone mentally because it's so terrifying to me. And yet every time I do, it pushes me to be better. It helps me make great connections. It helps me play bigger in my business. And in my life. And as I continue to do that every single year, it makes me more comfortable and more confident. And so I think pushing yourself to do things that you're uncomfortable with is a really good thing on a small level. I'm not saying you have to go jump out of an airplane, but I'm saying like pushing yourself to go to a networking event, to send the DM to somebody that you'd like to collaborate with, like shooting your shot more often than not will result in, at the very least, building your confidence that you're able to do so.
Oh my gosh, mic drop right there. Thank you so much for being on the show, Tessa. I so appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped. And I'm so excited to keep supporting you and playing bigger with you, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.